going to start our class, University District Minyan class, on Parshas Hashavua. So this week's Parsha, we have a few things this week. We have the Parshas Hashavua, which is Parshas Mishpatim, and we also have this week's also Shabbos Mevorchim, the month of Adar, and also this week is Shabbos Shkalim. That we read about the Shkalim, the first of the four Parshas, the Parsha which is connected to the giving of the half shekel, which was obligatory for every Jew to bring for the yearly sacrifices and your participation in the yearly sacrifices. Trying to make sure 100% I didn't mess up on the schedule here. And it's actually Shkalim this week. Yes, so this week is Shkalim, Mevorchim, and Mishpatim. So we take out two Sefer Torahs this week. The Sefer Torah for the reading of Shkalim and the Sefer Torah for Mishpatim. Very much so, Mishpatim is always connected to the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is always interesting that Mishpatim comes out around the time of Yud Shvat, which is the time that the Rebbe, we celebrate the Rebbe's acceptance of leadership in 1950, 1951 on Yud Shvat. And although it usually falls out a little bit earlier, but Parshas Mishpatim is always around Shvat. I don't believe Mishpatim can maybe be Mevorchim Adar, but it's definitely not in the month of Adar. And Parshas Shkalim is always the Shabbos read either Mevorchim or Rosh Chodesh entering into Adar. And if it's a leap year, then we would read Shabbos Shkalim closer to the Adar Sheni, which is for Purim. And in this year, where there's one Adar, we read it also Shabbos Mevorchim Adar from Shvat going into Adar. And also, the one who examines the Maimorim of Shabbos Shkalim, of Parsha Shekalim, which talks about the half shekel, also very much is the idea of Moshe Rabbeinu. And what does it mean, Moshe Rabbeinu? The idea of Moshe Rabbeinu is the Raya Mehemna that Alter Rebbe talks about, opens up this week's Parsha. What's interesting is that when you open up this week's Parsha and you look at it in a sense of the laws that are discussed in this week's Parsha, the laws are primarily laws that deal with Ben Adam L'Chaveroi, laws of Nezikim. Hey Pinchas, we got started without you. Tried to get him before.
I've been trying to get on all this time.
I hope it's not others are not having the same issue. So we're saying this week is Parshas Shkalim and also Parshas Mishpatim, and both Mishpatim and Shkalim deal with the unique relationship and importance of the Raya Mehemna, the faithful shepherd, which is Moshe Rabbeinu, and which is interesting, like I said, because the month of Shvat is the month where we celebrate the Rebbe's acceptance of leadership in 1950-51, and also, of course, is the time. Adar is also the month of Moshe Rabbeinu. So we're going into the month of Adar, and this week is the Shabbos, the blessing, the month of Adar, the Mishanichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. And the simcha happens because of Purim. That's the revealed. But the background story was because this is Moshe Rabbeinu's month. This is the month, and it says that when Haman drawed lots to see, to see how he's going to destroy the Jewish people, what would be the best time for him to destroy the Jewish people, he thought when it fell out on Purim, he was excited. Why was he excited? In the month of Adar. Why was he excited? Because it's the month that Moshe Rabbeinu passes away. So he thought this must be a bad month for the Jewish people. And what he didn't know is this is the month that Moshe is born. This is it's Kedai. It's the day of the Yom HaLeida, which is Mechapar and the Yom HaMisa. That Moshe's birth is more overrides. It's the beginning and the end of Moshe's life. He dies and he passes away he was born and passed away on the same day, on the 7th of Adar. And therefore, this is a happiest month, and it ends up being the happiest month. And all of Haman's plans goes down the drain and becomes totally 180. All the plans of our enemies that hasn't changed in 3,000 years plus. The Hamans that are still in Persia, that are planning the destruction of the Jewish people, Nashim v'Taf, Nashim v'Taf, men, women, and children, the destruction of Am Yisrael, Chas v'Shalom. They're still there, and they're still trying to destroy the Jewish people. And they don't know we're going in the month of Adar. This is the month of Mazel. This is the month of success. And and what leads us? What's the point of it all? Is Moshe Rabbeinu. And again, so although one who opens up Mishpatim, so although the end of Mishpatim talks about the continuation of Matan Torah, meaning to say the happenings of around the time of giving of the Torah, of how Moshe Rabbeinu prepared the Jewish people, and of course the famous statement that we have, Nasa v'nishma, we will do and then we will listen, is in this week's Parsha. But open up the name of the Parsha, and the initial messages of the first 5-6 aliyahs deal with the laws of Mishpatim. The name is Mishpatim, means the laws. These are the laws. And what are the laws? This is the laws of damages, and this is the laws of slave. So it says, Ki sikne eved ivri. The Alter Rebbe says, Ki sikne eved ivri means that when Moshe acquires a slave, what does it mean a slave? When Moshe makes an eved Hashem. We know that it says, V'avadetem es Hashem alikeichem. We have a pasuk in this week's Parsha that says you should serve Hashem your Lord. V'avadetem es Hashem alikeichem. You should serve Hashem your Lord. And what is the idea of to serve? Is to be an eved. Like it says in chapter 15 of Tanya, that you could be a very special person, and you could be even a Beinani that never thinks, acts, speaks, does anything wrong. Total control of their levushim, of their garments. Any inner or external expression or action is only according to Torah. If a thought pops into the mind of the Beinani, even if it's the most despicable thought or the most uncomfortable thought, it's okay. The Beinani is under control. The Beinani pushes it straight out of their mind. He or she doesn't allow it to dwell on this thought, wakes up every morning for Minyan, puts on tefillin every day, gives tzedakah, is kind, is loving, all the mitzvahs Hashem, doesn't do any avera, like the Alter Rebbe says, v'lo yavar, and won't do an avera. But still, the Alter Rebbe introduces in chapter 15 of Tanya, it's still asher lo yavadai. You could still be a person who doesn't serve God. Serving God is not just on a piece of paper to say you're a good Jew. Serving God is the process of serving God. An Eved, Oved Elikim, is a person who pushes themselves, gets uncomfortable for God. That doesn't look for what's the safest, easiest way for me to be a Jew. Says, how could I serve God? Where's the effort? Like the Alter Rebbe quotes in Tanya that there's a person who studies 100 times. They used to, in the days of the Talmud, they didn't have writing. So in order to remember something, you had to study it 100 times, right? We all know we forget things. So how do you make sure you don't forget? You keep on studying over and over. So in the days of the Mishnah and the Talmud, they studied 100 times. But that became the norm. That was no longer an effort, because that's how they studied every subject 100 times. But when the Alter Rebbe says, but that one extra time, if they went out of their norm and studied it 101 times, that's an Oved Elikim, pushing yourself. It's not that you wake up in the morning and say, how can I push myself? But the idea is you wake up in the morning saying, you're not saying, oh, how do I box in my Yiddishkeit? How do I become a Jew to make sure, how do I get through, how do I make it the easiest for me to be a Jew today? You go out there and say, what needs to be done? What's the avodah, the Maimorim, the discourses in Mishpatim, the discourses in the underlining story, like I call it, the white between the black. The Alter Rebbe talks about that when you have parchment, right? So one of the conditions is if you take ink and you have a big ball of ink, what do you have in a big bowl of ink? A big ball of black. Doesn't say anything. There's nothing there. It's just a big tub, a big pitcher, a big a jar of ink. It's all black. There's nothing there. Now, if you take the black ink and you pour it on a piece of wood, or you pour it on the floor, or even if you pour it on a piece of parchment, which is what you would write on, you just pour it on. What do you have? You just have a pool of black on the white parchment. You still have nothing. But if you take a quill, you take a pen, and you start shaping out shapes called letters, and each letter has white surrounding it, and white usually inside of it. Then all of a sudden you have a shape of a letter, and put letters together, because we know letters make sounds, you have words. And when you have words that are coherent, that make sense, then you have ideas. So if you want to say something, if you look at a ball of ink is very powerful. Why? Because in that ball, although there's nothing there, it's just a big ball of black ink, or blue ink, or red ink, whatever color ink you have. All you have is, you have a lot of potential for words, but you have absolutely no words. When do you have words is only when you make shapes of letters and on a white surface, on a white base, basis. We're going to learn soon in the laws of Shabbos. Then you could start shaping words, and then with the words you could start articulating ideas. So in Mishpatim, so the idea, what a person usually thinks is, when you look at a piece of paper or a piece of parchment that has letters, you're looking at the black, you're looking at the ink, because now you have shapes and letters and words and ideas. But if you don't have the white, the surface to hold the letters, and to define that this letter is this shape, this ink now creates this letter, and together, if I put them together, I have a word. So what really is giving us the idea is the white. The white is allowing for the ink to express itself. But we don't pay attention to the white. We only pay attention to the ink. So too, when you open up the Alter Rebbe explains that the white on the Sefer Torah is where all the hidden ideas are. What's really behind every single letter, because a letter can't exist without the white. Otherwise, it's just a piece of ink. So how do we create ideas? Is really the white, but we don't see the white ideas. Same thing when you open up the book of Mishpatim. You open up the Parsha Mishpatim. What you see is laws of servants, laws of watchers, laws of damages, laws of Mishpatim. But behind it there's an idea, and that idea is from the deepest ideas of avodah, from the deepest ideas of hiskashrus, connection to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's all in this week's parsha. Means you would think, where would God tuck away deep ideas of the Jewish faith? Idea of avodas Hashem, to serve God. V'avaditem es Hashem lekechem, prayer is a form of service. Where God tells us in the end of the parsha, v'hasiroisi machle, God is going to uproot any illness. And take this opportunity to wish a refuah shlema to my dear friend Pinchas Daniel by Miriam. Mishav refuah shlema v'hasiroisi machle mikirbecha. God should uproot v'rapa yirapa. We have many words of refuah in this week's parsha. You should have a full 100% refuah shlema v'teichachei v'achais Yisrael. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim. Amen.
So what do we have in this week's parsha? We have these deep ideas of iskashers, of connection. Who's Moshe Rabbeinu? The Alter Rebbe says that we open up the parsha and talks about the laws of slaves. A person today feels uncomfortable talking about the laws of slaves. Slavery is not something that we celebrate. But the Alter Rebbe says we're not talking about slaves only in the literal sense. There's the idea of being an Eved Hashem, a servant of God. Even if you're like we said before, chapter 15, even if you're a Beinoni, but if you're not pushing yourself, if you're not uncomfortable with yourself, if you're not getting out of your routine, you're not an Eved. An Eved, and there's different levels of Avodim. There's a servant who's forced. There's a servant who serves out of love. There's a servant there's the maid servant who changes herself for God. You know, a person could say, I'm giving, God made me who I am. And the way God made me, I'm going to serve Hashem. Or you could say, you know what? Let me think a second. Is the best way to serve Hashem the way I am? Maybe I could work on myself to change my character. And if I'm a person that's maybe narrow, I'm going to be more giving. If I'm a person who's all over the place, maybe I have to kind of rein myself in a bit. What does my mind tell me? Is there ways that I could change myself to make myself even a better servant of God? That's a higher level of service. That's the Amavriya. That's the Hebrew maidservant who takes food and makes it and cooks it and changes the taste, brings out the flavor of everything. Maybe there's deeper flavor in myself that I'm not finding. Maybe I'm too comfortable with my character. And maybe if I change certain parts of myself, I could bring out better flavor. There's so much more I could do with myself than just to give who I am without any change, without any effort. These are all ideas that are discussed in this week's Parsha of an Eved. And who does this? Who elevates us to excite us that we should be able to really get connected to Hashem and to be a Oved Elikim, to be a servant of God, is Moshe Rabbeinu. God tells Moshe, Ki Sikna Evedivi, that's your job, Moshe. You got to take these chevra and make them servants of God. You have so much potential. You have 600,000 strong men and thousands and hundreds and thousands of women and hundreds of thousands of children that are all diamonds, gold, that each one of them are such potential servants of God. And that's why I created the world. But I need you, Moshe Rabbeinu, Kisikne Avedivri, turn them into servants of God. Let them feel, let them be motivated, let them be excited every morning to wake up and serve Hashem. And these are ideas that we find in this week's Parsha. Right away, the Parsha opens up. That when a person and that's why we read this Parsha around the month of Adar, which is the month of Moshe Rabbeinu. And when we wake up on the morning of Mishpatim, when we talk about these laws, there's all kind of laws of service of God. But when we wake up in the morning and we hear that we could be a servant of God and we're connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't hide himself. Moshe is everywhere the same. Moshe Rabbeinu is the same Moshe when we need him for difficult times. Moshe is the same Moshe when we need him for food, we need him for drink, we need him for a hug. We need him for das, for understanding of God. Moshe is with us on every level. Moshe, there's no part of Moshe that says, this is something I can't deal with. There's nothing that's going on in your life that you can't close your eyes for a second and write a note to the Rebbe, the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation, and say, Rebbe, I need some help. I need some comfort. I need some insight. I need to feel connected. Kisikna, make me a servant of God. I want to be a servant of God. I need help. You write a letter to the Rebbe, the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation. It's Kisik and Eved Ivri. Moshe is there in every situation for every Yid. There is an Eved Kanani, and there's an Eved Ivri, and there's Alma Ivriya. There's no level of servant that Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have a relationship with and a plan and a way to help that person. That's Moshe's job. The Jewish people went to Moshe Rabbeinu for everything they needed in the desert. If they needed water, if they needed laundry, if they needed food, if they needed meat, if they needed bread. Anything they needed, they went to Moshe Rabbeinu. Hidavar, like Moshe says in last week's Parshat Yisrael, they need me. What do you want? The Jewish people need me. So Yisrael says, okay, you could have a system that we could deflect some of the issues we could handle from a smaller court. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, even the smaller courts are confident that if they run into some issues, that they can't help another Yid, they go up higher and higher until it goes to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu set up the system that he makes sure that everyone could be helped. And comes when you have a Parshat Mishpatim that also is Parshat Shkalim. Parshat Shkalim is the Parsha we read always before the month of Adar, or on Shabbos Mevorchim Adar, or on Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Adar. This week it's Shabbos Mevorchim Adar. This Shabbos we bless the month of Adar. And what is Parshat Shkalim? One of the 4 parshas that deal with the laws of the half shekel. And what's the half shekel? God tells Moshe, Kisi says Rosh B'nai Yisrael. Same idea. Moshe lifts up the heads of the Jewish people. God told Moshe. Moshe says, what's going to be the Medrash the Rebbe quotes? What's going to be when after I pass away, who's going to be there for the Jewish people? So God tells Moshe Rabbeinu that every Shabbos Parshat Shekalim, when they sit in shul and they read the Torah of Parshat Shekalim, you're going to be standing there in every single shul, everywhere in the world, and uplifting that person, that man, that woman, that child, to bring them closer to Hashem. So this week's Parsha, Mamash, like I said, if you open up the Parsha, you say this is a Parsha of laws, a Parsha of details, but that's the black. But if you look at the white underneath it, this is a Parsha full of connection, a Parsha full of hope, a Parsha full of bracha. Like the Rebbe quotes in the Mimer, that God usually talks in the third person. God says that God, if you open up the Parsha, the Rambam, the Nachmanides says If you open the Torah, what is the Torah? How does the Torah read? The Torah reads like a shlishi medaber, like there's a narrator. You have kids. You watch Winnie the Pooh, right? So there's the narrator who's telling the story. So you have the Torah. Seems like there's a narrator. Vayomer Hashem Moshe. God spoke to Moshe. Who's talking? Who's telling us the story? If God was telling the story, he would say, and I spoke to Moshe. If Moshe was telling the story, he would say, God spoke to me. But the Torah doesn't say that. It says God spoke to Moshe. Who's telling us the story? There's God and there's Moshe. Someone's telling us the story. It's called Shlishi Medaber, the essence of God. The name of God is a title. The essence of God is telling us the story in the Torah. The Shlishi Medaber, the Ramban says, the Shlishi Medaber is saying that God spoke to Moshe. But every once in a while, the narrator fits himself into the story itself. That he doesn't talk in the third person, he talks himself. And we have that in this week's Parsha. The end of reading of Shishi, I believe. The end of the 6th reading. It says, the end of the 6th reading, it says, hold on, give me a second here. The end of the 6th reading, it says, "Va'avadetem es Hashem Elokeichem." Again, God starts talking in the actual, not as the narrator. He says, "Va'avadetem es Hashem Elokeichem." You should serve Hashem, your Lord. Uveirach es lachmecha, and He will bless your bread. Vesmeimecha, and your fountains, your waters. V'hasiroisi, and then I will uproot. Machla mikirbecha. The narrator cuts in. He's not passive in the story anymore. Hashem, the essence, shows that He's involved. And He says, V'hasiroisi. And then, V'loitiyah meshakele v'akar b'atzecha es mispar yemecha amale. You won't have dead days and unfruitful days in your life. What does it mean, meshakele nakara, a woman who buries her young or who's barren, where a person puts an effort and nothing comes from it? God says if you're going to serve Hashem, you're going to have fruits from your effort. You're going to be able to be typhus, and you're able to grasp the moment. And if there's any days that you have in your life that are not full, that are not meaningful, that have passed, and you didn't serve Hashem, and you didn't do the things you should be doing. We're not perfect. God says, Alais, it's on me. I will fill your days. But be an eved, be a person, be alive, be serving, be focused, show effort. Don't sit there measuring and say, what do I have to do in my negotiations with God? Throw yourself into God. Throw yourself into serving Hashem and finding purpose. And this takes us back to all the issues where we read about this. We read about this in the month of Adar, the month that although it's the month of Purim, of success, it's also the month that our enemies wanted to destroy us. Our enemies wanted to kill the Jewish people, men, women, and children, for no reason. Haman says there's a people that are different. They eat different, they talk different, they dress different. The world doesn't need different people. Why can't everyone be as into Gashmias? Why is there these people that think they have a higher purpose? It bothered Haman, it bothered Achashverosh, it bothered the whole people of the world. We don't find anywhere that there was any protests in the kingdom of Achashverosh saying, what's going on over here? How are you killing millions of people? What did they do? There was no protest. No one could care less. We don't find anywhere where anyone protests Haman and Achashverosh's plan. But when we look at it, we say, so what do we do? What did Mordechai do? Mordechai went inside. He took the Jewish children, he said, we're going to study Torah. They davened, they fasted, they strengthened their relationship with Hashem. And then the miracle came. Not because it made sense. The Rebbe always says, how did Esther fast before she went into the king? The king didn't call her, right? We all know the story. Esther is told by Mordechai that Haman's going to kill the Jewish people. And she says, I can't talk to the king. He hasn't called me in 30 days. He's lost interest in me. And even I can't walk into the king and talk to him without permission. So what does she have to do? She has to make herself beautiful so the king will find her interesting. And maybe then she could get his ear and plead the case with the Jewish people. But she first has to get inside. So like the Rebbe spoke, what do you think she would do in such a situation? She would go to the beauty parlor. She would get the nicest clothes. She'd make sure she looks physically beautiful and attractive to the king. But that's not what she does. She fasts for 3 days. And how does a person look after they fast for 3 days? Not exactly attractive. Because she knows, as Esther the queen only knows, as a true Jewish queen knows, that it's not about the outer beauty, it's the inner beauty. And she was working on her inner beauty and her relationship with God. She knows that it's not about, she has to go to the king. Of course she has to go to the king. But she first has to work on her inner beauty, her relationship with God. And then God will do what he does. And as the story goes, when Achashverosh sees her, after fasting for 3 days, he finds her irresistible. And he brings her in and he has the meal, and we all know how the story ends with Haman hanging on a tree. And the rest of the enemies destroyed. This week's Parsha, we learned that when we're facing adversaries, when we're facing enemies, we're avodat Hashem lekechem, we work inside. We find to make sure we're stronger Jews. We become an eved of Hashem. Kisisa esroish, we lift up our heads, not in shouting and screaming, but kisisa esroish through Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu lifts up our head in his kashrus. We know that when we're standing in shul this week, and there's enemies all over, we become strong inside. We focus inside. We focus on who we are, what our message is, what our purpose is. This is how this parsha starts. This is how the parsha ends. We're just going to finish off with an idea that says, like in the relationship of the four watchers, that you have a watcher who watches for free, right? You give someone, can you do me a favor and watch my house, watch my car? You have a person who watches for pay. You have a person who rents, and you have a person who borrows. Those are called the Arba Shomrim. And they have different laws of responsibilities. No one is allowed to be negligent. But if a person watches for free, you can't expect a person to be responsible for anything outside of negligence. If someone comes and steals it, he says, listen, you put it in my house. I told you to put it in the corner. It stayed in the corner. I didn't do anything with it. The house was safe. Someone came in and stole it. I'm sorry. If you get paid for it, sorry, I paid you. You had to make sure that no one steals it. If you rent it, you also have responsibilities. If you rent something, you have to make sure you have to return it. If you borrow it, you have even more responsibility. You didn't even pay me for it. These are all 4 ways of our relationships to Hashem. God says, here's the world. I give you the world. Go make it into a godly place. So if you're looking at the world as a borrowing, God's world, right? Where's Leah Kesef Leah? Who has gold? Who has silver? Who has diamonds? Who has Bitcoin? Who has money? Who has Parnasa? Who has Gesund? Who has Nachas? All it's God's. It belongs to God. So you want to enjoy life. So you're like a borrower. You're borrowing from God, the world. You better make sure that anything you're chayav and every kind, you're very responsible. It's not you're not doing anything. You're just borrowing from me. You want me to give you a handout. You better make sure you have your level of responsibility. You can't damage anything that I'm giving you. But if a person comes to God and says, I'm a shayim machinam, I'm not asking for anything. I just want to be able to serve you. God says, okay, just make sure and don't be negligent. But otherwise, it's Allah, it's on me. It's misveri mecha mali. When you become an eved Hashem, when you become a servant, there our focus is we're not looking to have for what God is going to give us. We're looking for how we could fulfill our purpose. And God says, just don't be negligent. Don't drop the ball. Be focused. And you're going to see that this world is an amazing world and there's amazing opportunities. And like we saw in the days of Haman, it turned around. We don't care about what our enemies have planned for us. And we know that we don't rely on Achashverosh. You can't rely on here. The Rebbe said clearly 1961, 19 Tafshin Chabez, 1962, when he celebrated his 60th birthday, that Hine Zeba mi Edem, Hine Zeba mi Batsra, Chametz begadim mi, sorry, Hine Zeba mi Edem, Chametz begadim mi Batsra. The connection between Edom and Batsra, between the West and the East, God sees that no one wants to help the Jewish people. Hashem himself is going to come and help the Jewish people. We don't have to be worried about that. We don't have to open the news and say, "Oh, this person wants to hurt us. This person doesn't want to help us. This person wants to destroy Eretz Yisrael. This person wants to destroy the Jewish people." We know that there's a big God, and He's ready to soil His clothing. He comes soaked in blood to fight the wars for the Jewish people, and we have to do our job. Like Esther. Esther did her job, and Hashem did His job. And that's this week's Parsha. Stay connected. Become an Eved. Become a servant. Find purpose. Kisi says Rosh. Connect yourself to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is a Parsha of Moshe. It's a Parsha of Iskashrus. A Parsha of connecting to the Rebbe. Saying the Rebbe is taking on resolutions of the Rebbe's Takanis. Learning a little bit of Rambam every day. Opening up. You can learn. It takes 5 minutes to learn the Sefer HaMitzvahs. To learn the mitzvah of the day. You open up your English website of Chabad.org and read the mitzvah of the day. It's about 10 lines. And you say a little bit of Chumash and a little bit of Tehillim daily. Like the Rebbe says today, if we knew the power of Tehillim, we would never stop saying Tehillim. That's a tradition for the Jewish people from the beginning of time. So l'chaim chaver, l'chaim everyone, and we should have nisim v'neflois, big miracles we're going to see. It's going to happen. Stay focused. Don't be negligent in our service of God. Become a servant and say, like our great forefathers said, Hineni, I'm here for you, God. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. Have a good Shabbat and have a good Chodesh. See you next week.
Good night. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.